Clemson. What I'm watching for them this fall camp is I'm watching offensive synergy. Yeah, Cade Klubnik coming back another year in Garrett Riley's system. Everybody's focused on that. I am too. They need to take care of the ball better. They killed themselves with turnovers last year. They were out of this thing for all intents and purposes by like week 3 or week 4 last year. They got to show up in big games. Cade Klubnik has to show up in big games. I think they've got a better wide receiver unit. Some of that young wide receiver talent is better than anything they've had there in a while. That offensive line needs a jump. It was average last year. Needs a jump. Clemson could either be a team that regresses again, or they could literally win the ACC, and a lot of it will come down to offensive synergy. Next up, how quick was that, Jesse? Was that under a minute? I challenged myself to do all these under a minute. We'll see if I can. LSU, is that defense going to improve? Now, we could go all 3 levels, but specifically, you look at Blake Baker, new defensive coordinator. You look at Kevin Peoples, Bo Davis. I added so many quality defensive coaches. Will the level of play increase like the level of coaching staff increase defensively? They're very green in the secondary. Now, I know very early on we're going to get some good reports from down there. I'm worried about depth, I'm worried about longevity, and I'm worried about consistency because you can play good 8 times out of 10 and still get beat by 2 touchdowns because the 2 blown plays went 80 yards to the house. Competitive depth is another thing that they've got to develop. Defensive front, secondary. LSU, man, if that over-under win total is 9.5, that means odds makers are confident you've got it. We'll see if they've got it. Next up, when we were at Big Ten Media Days a couple of weeks ago, we had Kurt Ferentz on the show. Well, we interviewed him. We didn't have him on the show, but we interviewed him. And so the thing I'm watching with Iowa, of course, is the offense, but how much underground hype will we feel start to build in? Because if there's something really happening, you normally feel it start to bubble up in fall camp. Tim Lester's the new offensive coordinator there. Tim Lester has an offensive line that needs to be better. That's kind of one of the secret overlooked components of Iowa's underachievement offensively is their offensive line hasn't even played to the level it should be. Now, that's one thing that they should have the market cornered on up there is quality O-line play. They haven't had that. They've got 166 starts returning on that unit. And so whoever plays quarterback there, I got a new OC. If that offensive line is up to the task, well, then we can start to build a foundation. Top 60 unit? Can they be that good? Because if they are, they're a dark horse playoff contender. Because elsewhere, Iowa's a really solid football program. Down at Miami, where would you go here? I saw earlier today, I saw that Cam Ward got preseason All-ACC Player of the Year. Colin and Jesse, did you see that? How about that? And what I loved about Cam Ward getting preseason All-ACC Player of the Year is everyone was really mature about it. Everyone handled it great. A guy who's never taken a snap in the conference, who transferred from across the country with a ton of NIL hype, he's the preseason Player of the Year. From Tallahassee to Clemson and everywhere in between, people just, they tipped their cap and they said, congrats, Cam. At least that's what I saw. Far be it for those fan bases to handle it any differently. I'd be irate if I were you guys. But nevertheless, that's not what I want to talk about with Miami. At Miami, there's going to be a lot of hype around Cam Ward. Should be. Big-time quarterback. I think he'll pan out. I think Cam Ward will be a dynamic playmaker for them. How many points is he going to need to put up per game? Because the secondary is what I'm watching very closely in Miami's fall camp. They're unproven at safety, had a good duo there. They're both gone. That sophomore class made some noise last year. A sophomore class this year, second-year class this year. They will be woven all throughout the 2 deep. A lot of them will start. And then that true freshman class coming in, along with those transfers, that'll be more and more and more as the weeks go on, the critical and majority makeup of Miami's roster. It'll be Mario's guys. That's all you could want. If you believe in your process as a head coach, you bring in your guys, you infuse them into the roster, now you got to go win with them. Next up, Oklahoma. It's very clear that offensive line is the question at Oklahoma. It's the focus as we go into fall camp. They had 9 offensive line departures. They had 7 of those guys who had started. 196 games started on the offensive line, gone. Okay? That doesn't mean that it has to be a weakness. It does mean it's a glaring question that could become a weakness. Hickson at center, I think, is okay. Questions at both guard positions. There's this quiet confidence amongst the Oklahoma people about the tackles, but there's not proven production there. And so if they can be better than expected, then that unlocks all the potential of Jackson Arnold at quarterback. That, of course, unlocks the potential, and it's sizable potential, of that wide receiver core. You're bringing Deion Burks. Guy could just explode, could be one of the all-SEC caliber players that people who don't follow the portal never saw coming. Got to have that offensive line in order. The next team that I'm focused on is one that we were close with last week at Big Ten Media Days, Michigan. Do we get consistency? Do we get dependability in the passing game? Now, that's before I even ask the other big question, and that's who's going to be the starting quarterback there? There's been an assumption written in pencil that it's going to be Alex Orji. I truly believe they've got a competition up there. Davis Warren, Jack Tuttle, they've got a shot, but I think it's Alex Orji's to lose, and that's how I look at it. That's not feedback from the program because he's more dynamic than they are. There are tools he has that those other guys don't have. But it doesn't matter if there's not good decision-making and there's not consistency. Michigan's not a program that needs 40 per game to win. They're still going to play the same kind of defense they've been playing there for a while. Decision-making, being A-plus in that compartment, that's what will win you that quarterback position. Texas had a lot of churn, and yet Texas is right up there. You saw the JP poll, very high on Texas. You saw yours truly here, very high on Texas. Texas needs to find ways to be top 20 against the run. They just need to be a top 20 run-stopping unit. They lost big-time playmakers on the interior of the defensive line. The game control here is what separates teams that can win it versus teams that can just compete for it. There is no gap between you and anyone else if you can't control the game up front. You may be able to win every game, but it's back and forth, nip and tuck, coin flip. They were 116th last year in pass yards allowed. And so the secondary is another focus that you could have, but I'm worried about stopping the run here. And then that goes to the other side of the ball. Then that goes to how much is asked of Quinn Ewers, how much is asked of this retooled wide receiver core. A lot of promise, but lack of proven production at Texas. A lot has to come together. A lot has to come together. Now, luckily, you're not trying to, bubblegum and paperclip your way to an SEC contending season because you got talent there, a lot of talent. It's just there's a lot of unproven. This is college football. That's the way it has to happen. That has to become proven there. Probably a little bit more, I think, than most of the country would assume. Most of the country, I'm talking about the more, not the casual-minded crowd, but just the crowd that doesn't follow it hardcore day to day. They probably look at the odds. They probably saw Texas go to the playoff last year, and they probably think to themselves, okay, like they're a bona fide contender, a whole lot of guys return this year. Well, some of them do. There are big-time players that aren't there anymore. Worthy's not there anymore. Those two on the interior of the D-line, A.D. Mitchell, those guys aren't there anymore. So that's why you put a premium in recruiting, and that's why you put a premium in development. Next up, let's go to, rest in peace to the Pac-12. Let's go to the Big 12. Is Utah really Utah on the line of scrimmage? Because that's how you know Utah. Utah, if I tell you one thing, give me one thing about Utah, you just ball both of your fists and you punch them together. That's Utah football. Well, they're replacing their top two offensive linemen. And they were average at preventing tackles for loss last year. So the Big 12 is a little grittier conference up front than the Pac-12 was. Top 20 defense in sacks last year and top 5 in run D, but they lost their top pass rusher. So everyone assumes, and kind of me as well, that Utah's just a certain caliber up front because that's their hallmark. Are they that caliber team up front? Schedule's very favorable for them. Are they the kind of team that can take over games out there? At Alabama, obviously there's the Nick Saban question, but I mean, we've talked about that for a while, so we can get a little more granular than that. Is Alabama going to be good enough in the secondary this year? Kind of like Texas, there's a lot of talented names, but are unproven, and are going to have to step in and play big time for them. There's a screen right now you're looking at with all the losses they had in the secondary. And so that's one thing. Kane Womack takes over as the defensive coordinator there, former head coach at South Alabama. Over on the other side, Kobe Prentice, newcomers like Ryan Williams, Kendrick Law, Jeremy Bernard. Is there a 1,000-yard receiver in that room? Kalen DeBoer's offense would lead me to believe someone's going to have a shot. But is there one there? What kind of player is Jalen Milroe in that system? Is there a difference maker up front for them in the pass rush? I don't think there's a Will Anderson there. I don't know that there's a Dallas Turner there. Some really good names, though, some former five-star names. Who emerges? It's one of the fun things to watch, especially with these teams that load up on 4- and 5-star talent every year. And then some of that 4- and 5-star talent sort of disappears off the radar for a couple of years. Keon Keeley's a perfect example. Yanze Pierre is a perfect example. These are big-time names from recruiting classes gone by that could all of a sudden explode this year. And you're like, where did they come from? Oh, that's right. Those were 5-stars 2 or 3 cycles ago. They just waited their turn. One more, not to be left behind on the scrap heap. Georgia going to tee it up and give it a good college try this year. What level of defensive line play do we get from Georgia this year? Probably not elite. Will it be good enough? Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, Christian Miller, and then a bunch of guys who have promise, but again, are unproven. Is that the kind of dynamic front? Do they have the quality of depth, the versatility of depth, and the dynamic difference makers up front for it to be a vintage Georgia team? Or is it the kind of Georgia team that could still win it all? They'll still be favored in every game, but because they can't take over up front like those championship teams did, they're in a few closer games maybe than they're comfortable with. The tight end room, I think, is still elite, by the way. Lawson Lucky, Oscar Delp. Ben Urasek is a guy we were hearing about when we went up there in February, which was before spring ball. They got him from Stanford. No one knew about him. They wanted to keep it that way. I think you'll know about him before too much longer. Those are some of the things I'm watching. Now, you can comment and you can lead me in different directions if you want to, but there are a lot of questions, which is what makes August so beautiful, because everyone thinks they know. Everyone gets their idea, and then all of a sudden you open up your practice report, you're over on the Big Spur, or you're on Horns 24/7, or you're on any of the websites. I don't care where you go, Auburn Undercover, and all of a sudden you see, wait, the guy that I trusted to get 10 sacks this year is not even running with the ones at outside linebacker. What's happening? It's August. It's August. That's what's happening.